So today we begin the second chapter, the 18th chapter, in the middle of the 18th chapter where we left off. Well, the Rabbi explained in last week's class that the beginning of the chapter, which we learned in last week's class, that every single Yid has a neshama, a part of God which exists within him. Hence, the entire notion of Korev Elecha Hadavar Ma'id becomes so understood, and as we explained, the real kurva, the real closeness of Torah, mitzvahs, is, and to the extent that the pasuk uses the word Ma'id, is namely based on this explanation. As we said in the previous chapters, the Alter Rebbe proved and pointed out how it's Korev Elecha Hadavar Ma'id, but that you are here in one place and you're trying to reach a place which is the domain of Torah, mitzvahs, the iskashrus to HaKadosh Baruch Hu via Torah mitzvahs, and that is Korev Ma'id, which the Alter Rebbe is saying in the 18th chapter, at the real kurva, the real closeness of Torah mitzvahs to the Yid is prior to him taking a step to Torah mitzvahs, because he has the Torah mitzvahs as a part of him and as his inclination to the Eivishter, to Hashem, which again Hashem demands and wants the Yid's compliance with Torah mitzvahs, is part and parcel of the Yid himself, because he has a neshama which is part of Hashem, and hence his innate desire is to do only what Hashem wants and to stay away from this what Hashem does not want. So it's not that I have to close myself from my place to my domain to Torah mitzvahs, and to Alter Rebbe proving in the previous chapters that's also karev with the different explanations, with the different dimensions. But namely in the chapter 18, Alter Rebbe is saying that it's karev because this is who you really are innately, and because it's innately you, so therefore this is the real karev elecha hadavar ma'id. To it is from a certain perspective and sense even more than this which was explained in these different dimensions in our Avodas Hashem of the previous chapters. So again, as we elaborated on this in last week's class of the chidush of this peirik over the previous chapters, and where was the Yid Zeicha to this neshama? So this came from the Avis. The Avis who inherited this because of their enormous self-nullification and self-subordinance to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, as we expanded on this notion of the bittul of the Avis in last week's class, so they inherited, in other words, they had the ability to give over to all their descendants this level of elokus, this level of godliness, which becomes part and parcel of every single Yid. And Alter Rebbe we concluded last week's chapter by saying that it is not just it exists somewhere in a lofty dimension or an abstract dimension within man. This elokus, this godly reality exists within the Yid, and it's mechaya. It vivifies, it vitalizes the entire mitzias of the Yid. Hence, everything about him, be'etzem, stands with a bittul, essentially stands with a bittul, a nullification to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So today's chapter, we begin in Chachma, which is in the middle of Perek Yud Ches. The words begin in Chachma. So this Chachma, which is the Kayach Aliki, the godly energy which exists within the Yid, which again the source of it is Chachma, the source of the Neshama is Chachma v'Kadosh Baruch Hu. This is Mekeira Seichel v'Havana v'Lamayla Mahabina. It is the source of Seichel, the source of structure, understanding, and it's higher than Bina, which is again known as the structured understanding of Avodas HaSeichel v'Asagase, understanding the concept, understanding the intellectual, the intellect or the intellectual message of Asagase and its perception. Chachma is higher than that. What does it mean higher when you're dealing with understanding, perceiving, higher than structured bina of understanding? What does it mean higher? So we can understand it simply by the understanding what in the word starting. Let's use the word of chachma itself. The chachma itself is a combination of two words. Koyach ma. It's a koyach of what? What means that it's not something yet which is tangible. Let's use the simple example. When someone's reading a book, any book, not only a book of Torah, a sefer of Torah, but any book, and he has a difficulty understanding what he is reading. And he puts his head to it, and finally he catches the idea, understands what these words mean. Kind of a flash, a light turns on, and he says, I just received it. I just got it. I just understand the words, just the message which are in the words just kind of flashed into his eyes, because before that the words were kind of cryptic. He didn't make sense what the message of these words to him. He knew there was a message, but he didn't understand the message, and suddenly the words make perfect sense, and he starts shining, and a flash comes into him, and he pretty much understands what these words mean. If someone was sitting beside him, which is trying to understand this idea in the same manner, and asks him, so what did you understand? You got it? You just said you jumped and you said you got it. Could you explain me what you got? He can't explain him yet. He usually would tell him, give me a few moments. It has to make sense to me in order for me to explain it to you. And the question is, if it has to make sense to him, or he has to expand on it and expound upon this which he just understood. So why is it? What happened a moment ago when he jumped and he said, I got it? And the truth of the matter is, when you read something, all of a sudden you understand it. There is kind of a flash, and you do understand what you a moment ago had difficulty understanding. So why is it that you cannot just give it over immediately to your friend? And the answer is very simple. That the reason why you can't give it over, because you have the idea, but it stands in a transcendent, abstract manner as of yet. That is the opening connection to a concept via one's intellect. This is usually the way it develops. The opening part of the development is the chokhmah. Your koach of chokhmah grabs it, but yet in order for it to resonate within you, you need the bina, which is the expansion on the concept. So the chokhmah is more like that flash, that lightning. It's very bright, but it's not something you can hold. For example, we had this in the past. We gave a similar example. That someone's walking and he sees a lightning, and he says, wow, everything turns so bright. And his friend, which didn't notice it, whatever it is, his eyes were closed or any other circumstance. So what did you see? He said, everything, the whole sky's lit up. He said, well, it was there and it was bright, but now it's gone. That flash, that chokhmah, in other words, the first compartment, or the entry into understanding any concept, usually begins with chokhmah. It begins with an abstract flash. It's not tangible yet, and therefore, for that reason, you can't give it over. And therefore, you need to go on with the next level, which is called bina, taking that nekuda, taking that potent. And I say potent because many times in the flash there's a certain potency which even after you expand on that chokhmah, on that concept, to some degree you lose that clarity which came in the initial flash of understanding. But not to go there, the advantage in chokhmah over bina, but there's something very strong and very bright, similar to a flash or a lightning, in the initial stage of development, in the initial state of entry into perceiving something intellectually. And from the chokhmah, then you take it and you expound on it, you expand on the concept, you expound on the concept, and it becomes tangible, palpable to you, so you have it, hence consequently you give it over to a friend. So that is the difference of chokhmah and bina. So chokhmah, that's why the word chokhmah, as we started explaining, chokhmah is koach ma. It's a koach, a very strong koach. It's the opening entry into perceiving a concept, but it's ma. Ma means what? It's like you see a lightning, someone says, where's the lightning? What? It's gone? Like a flash. You ask yourself, or one would ask you about it, you say, it's gone. It's what? Means to say you don't have it strongly, or you don't have it you don't find the dominance over the concept. You don't have the balabatishkeit. You don't have the authority over the concept yet, because it's still in a transcendent, abstract manner. That is the koyach ma. The whole chokhmah is a koyach ma. What? On the one hand, it's the beginning. It's very strong and it's very energetic, but in the same token, it's still abstract. That's why it's ma. So the Alter Rebbe explains over here is that when you're dealing with a neshama, which we said that every yid has a neshama, the connection of every yid's neshama to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu is really part and parcel of him. It's not this thing that his connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is because he has a clear perception in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Eibishter, I know you thoroughly, and I thought you're all about you through and through in a way that's why I'm excited about you, or that's my connection to you. That's not the way the Yid is connected to Kodesh Baruch Hu. The Yid is connected to Kodesh Baruch Hu in a way that is even transcendent of his structured power of perception, because it's so profound and it's so deep. It's not something you could pinpoint and point your finger and say, this is why I'm connected to Kodesh Baruch Hu. It is l'chatchila in a way of chokhmah, koyach ma. It's something which is completely removed, transcendent of our conscious reality. So is it an advantage or a disadvantage? Well, it's obviously not only in a context of advantage over the koach of bina, but it's something which it demonstrates the depth, the very deep and most profound connection of Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Similar to a child and a father. It's not because he knows that his father with any calculation, and ultimately his father treats him in a certain way and with a certain love and a certain with dignity and connection, and he's kashrus and bound to him because he's his father and so on, or he gives him what he needs, he pays for it, he gives him to eat and tuition and all these good things in the healthy relationship of parent to child. The connection of father to son to father, this is my father. It's go explain it. It's nothing to be explained, it just is. That is, without explanation, is extremely potent and extremely energetic and extremely powerful. The connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is just is. Because it's on the level of koach ma. It's not something which doesn't begin with bina, it begins with chokhmah. So it certainly could expand from chokhmah to bina, because we have that innate, profound connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We ought to ponder on the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We ought to invest our minds and thoughts in expanding our minds and thoughts in godly concepts and realities of the godly reality. But in the same token, this is all a secondary connection and a secondary level. The next level, the first level of the Yid's connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's koyach ma, it's chokhmah, means to say that it starts much deeper than a structured connection. For that matter, the Alter Rebbe is going to conclude this very chapter saying that in history, many Yidden gave up their life for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It meant physically giving their life up for Hashem. And unfortunately, we had over the 3,300 years of Jewish, or so many thousands of years of Jewish suffering, naturally to the exclusion of the great times the Yidden experienced. But there was hundreds of thousands of millions of Jews over the years which gave up their life to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they did it deliberately. It's not only in certain circumstances which you unfortunately have, we didn't have any choice, which even then, interestingly, if you go through the history even the last 70 years, how Yidden went into the concentration camps or in the gas chambers screaming Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the presence of the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is in their conscious mind, that they verbally uttered the words Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. When you think about it, where was God for them? They were being killed at that time. And the answer is that this becomes the very nature of the Yid, in a way that it's not something which comes from a place which makes sense. It comes from a place which is transcendent of sense. Even everything is completely dark in my personally conscious life, but Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, because my connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is transcendent of that. It doesn't come from the world of bina. It comes from chokhmah. And similarly, in times when the Jew had the choice to give his life up over HaKadosh Baruch Hu because he did not want to formally renounce the oneness of Hashem, so he was ready to die in front of hundreds of people on the stake completely giving up his body for the Achdus Hashem, not to even one moment bow down or do something even externally, which would be a demonstration of his renouncing the oneness of Hashem. And where does that koach come from? And Alter Rebbe points out it wasn't particularly the scholarly, those who had an elaborate understanding of the reality of Hashem, those who had were scholarly, or those who were tzaddikim. It was very simple people. People did not have a clear, comprehensive understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of the godly reality. It was many times simple people, as Alter Rebbe says, women, children, again, not chas v'shalom in a negative, expressing negatively on women or children, but those who don't have the adequate time and mind to invest in pondering in the greatness of Hashem in an elaborate manner, they were the ones who gave up their lives. The famous story of Elchanan and her 7 children and so on. And the question is, where does it come from that a person is ready to leave his body behind and just completely give it up, consume or connect with the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even if it means giving up, physically giving up not only a bodily desire but the entire expiration of the body? And the answer is that it doesn't come from a place where God makes sense. It comes from a place where koach ma, it just really just is. And from that is, and that's who I am, there was no other choice in the matter, because Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And whatever consequence it takes. So this is Alter Rebbe will point it out later, but namely, our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not because we understand. Famous expression over here, Alter Rebbe brings this pasuk, it says, Pesi yamin l'chol davar, a fool believes everything. Interestingly, that Chazal tell us this is referring to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, which was the Chochmah itself, the one is Moshe Kibul Teira Misinai, but Teira is called Chochmaschem Abinaschem, Leini Kol Ha'amim, the wisdom of Hashem, the understanding of Hashem, which was given. Moshe Rabbeinu was the conduit to which he receives the Teira and gives over Teira to Am Yisrael, should be called Pesi. The answer is yes. Moshe Rabbeinu's bittul, self-nullification of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was not based on his understanding. It was because of Yamin L'chol Davar. He believes because this is who he is. It's not based on his Chochmah. It's based on something which transcends structured Chochmah, which the term Pesi in the context is used. So the Alter Rebbe continues, we will learn a little bit more in the text, because we're going to culminate this chapter in this following week, even though we give over here a few pieces, a few tidbits of what Alter Rebbe was getting at. But let's understand, Alter Rebbe is saying that the Chochmah, which is the source of the Neshama, is called Koach Ma, Shumashe Eine Musugum, and it's not something which is perceived and understood, the Eine Nitzas Basog Adain, something which is grasped with one's understanding, Koach HaBina. And therefore, it says, V'lechein Mislabish Ba'oid Sof Baruch Hu Les Mashavet Fis Beklal. And therefore, this becomes the keli, the vessel, to which the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is able to invest in, because ultimately, when one says, in a sense, Alter Rebbe is adding over here, to which we said before, that if it's based on my understanding, it's probably not genuinely godly. It's not God, ultimately. Because when I say understand, we know that God is less machshava tfisa beiklal. We cannot perceive the reality of God in no form or fashion. So we're told to we're told to know God to our maximum ability, but it doesn't begin from our structured knowledge. If it began from our structured knowledge, it's probably not God, as opposed to if it begins from the deeper, profound reality which we dealt in before, that just God is, and ultimately that could ultimately filter into our bina and das to fulfill this command in the BAYT. And why so? Because the Eibishter Hashem, similar like we say in the bigger picture, like the Gemara says that when someone is a haughty person, someone who is a balgaiva, a person, Hashem cannot dwell in his domain. Because if it's him, it's not God. And if it's God, it has to be, the keli to that is as dakas shval ruach eshkin, which means the one who stands in a bittul, someone stands in a state of self-nullification. Because if it's all about himself, God said, I can't be in that domain. So there we're talking about something which is impure ego. You're dealing with something which is someone's gaiva, someone's haughtiness, which is again by nature impure. We can understand why godliness cannot reside in that domain. But here you're dealing more in a subtle level, even though the message is the same. It's about my understanding of godliness. That's not where God is, because God is transcendent from any perception. So the best keli, the best vessel for where God, the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's less machshavat tfisa beklal, God which is not perceivable, could enter is in that part of the neshama which is transcendent from any structured I understand this or I understand that. It's a matter of koyach ma, is just that God, the reality which exists, becomes the keli to the Ein Sof, which less machshavat tfisa beklal, the infinite HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is not perceived. Again, it's the same notion of what the Gemara speaks, but there is again you're dealing with something, an impure haughtiness or impure ego. But here, even the fact that it's about me understanding, that's not where God is, because if you understand, what do you understand? God is transcendent of understanding. So the keli is a deeper level. The koyach ma, which is in my neshama, which is the chachma, which is transcendent of any structured understanding. That's where the Ein Sof, which less machshavat tfisa beklal, that's its initial entry. So again, from there we can go on and bina and das. And Hashem, on the contrary, as we said, Hashem says v'yadai to hayim. We have a command to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the beginning, the entry of the connection with God with the neshama, precisely comes from the koyach of ma, which is not yet anything. It's what dissected from any structure. That is the keli that becomes the vessel to which the Ein Sof enters, and that's where HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the neshama connect. And therefore, Kol Yisrael afil anoshim hamoritz himaminim b'Hashem. And therefore, we find every Yid believes in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because this is the as we'll explain next week, God willing, this is the point of emunah. Emunah is faith. Faith, by definition, means something which is transcendent of understanding. If you understand something thoroughly, you need not to believe in it. Believe and faith are two separate components in our structure of Avodas Hashem. A Yid is a maimin, and he has another dimension with him, which is a seichel v'yadai to hayim. Because if you know something, you need not to believe in it, and if it's just believed, so you don't know it. So he says the connection, even the understander, someone who is a scholar, even in his in understanding of godliness, not only the information of Torah, but a scholar in his understanding of godliness is a maskil and a lakus. That's not where his connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu begins, because the etzem, it's about the emunah, it's about the belief, which we understand and we know. Belief is much deeper and much more profound than the koach of haskala, the koach of intellect, because, as we mentioned before, belief is something so deep. And again, its association with chokhmah, koyach ma. It's that ma, that what, that's something which is completely abstract or transcendent from my structured understanding, my structured haskala. That is the koyach ma. Where does it exist? Nothing to do with the scholarly, and it's completely irrelevant to the scholarly Yid. It belongs to everybody, because on that level of chokhmah, all Yidden are the same. And that level of emunah, all Yidden are the same. For that matter, interestingly, it says a number of places, Al Rebbe does not say it over here, that anoshim and amoritz, many times the simple people, because their understanding is not tainted their emunah. It doesn't mean a person should just remain with emunah. It says v'yadai to hayim, but a person has to know that every yediyah, every knowledge of his, as we mentioned before, bina has to be a secondary expression, das has to be a secondary expression, or in extension of the connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the level of Chokhmah Koyach. It cannot begin with Bina, because if it begins with Bina, in a sense, it taints the purity of the connection of the Yid with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there has to be B'yadai to Hayim. But where does it begin the Yid's connection with Emunah? As we're getting at over here, is many times that somebody who does not have the nikuda v'hechala, like it says in the lashon of Kabbalah, which means it doesn't, the koyach hachokhmah, the emunah, does not suffuse, pervade into his bina and das, into his scholarship, in the knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Somewhat the knowledge, that scholarship would be taint to a certain degree his emunah, and it would come to fruition that who would give up his life. Sometimes we found the amharitz, the simple person or the woman, the child, would give up her life Again, classically, the story with Chaninah and her 7 children, one after the other, even more than the scholarly person, because of his scholarship, his understanding, his perception of God to some degree, if it's not infused with that purity of the Koach HaChochma, it could ultimately taint that purity of the Koach HaChochma, which is the emunah of the Yid, and therefore not necessarily he's running to give up his life for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It doesn't mean he can't, but it means that he has to put in perspective that everything, he has to know that any yodaita, any idea, any structured knowledge is an expression, or it comes secondary, it's a result, or it's an extension of the koach of emunah, of koach HaChochma. We look forward to continue.